So it's no secret that there are definitely a lot of powerful field spells in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And that raises the question of, should terraforming be put to basically one? I don't think two would really work, because a lot of decks already run two, but should terraforming be put to one on a future ban list? Now, I think one of the biggest factors that really makes some of the more modern field spells as powerful as they are is the fact that they search on activation. Say things like Magical Meltdown, Union Hanger, and then Diagram doesn't search on activation, but pops one to search, which gets you a plus pretty much anyway. So these new field spells, you can run 3 of them, 3 terraforming, that's 6 copies basically. That is 6 more copies of pretty much any card you want in your deck. Like say in, obviously in Invoked you want Alistair, you can run pretty much 9 copies of Alistair. In ABC you can run 9 copies of any piece essentially, just because you have your 3 terraforming, your 3 hanger, and then 3 copies of each piece. So you can get whichever one you need extremely fast in the deck. Obviously it's not like a once per duel kind of thing. If you have another one, you can just slap it down on top. And now we're getting to a point where they don't even have once per turn on them anymore. Even things just like Magical Meltdown, which is fairly recent, a few months ago, has once per turn, but Draconic Diagram, from the newest set, doesn't have once per turn on it. So if they open 3 of them and you stop 2 of them, they can just keep going and use the 3rd one, which is very insane. The fact that that card doesn't have a once per turn clause makes it extraordinarily powerful, even more so than it already is. But so these new field spells are adding an insanely new level of consistency to these decks, allowing you to run essentially 6 copies of everything. Also, there are a lot of more generic field spells that can help lock down your opponent. Things like Secret Village of the Spellcasters, Necro Valley is a big one, even Zombie World against decks that tribute or need things on field to be certain types. And again, that's, say with more traditional floodgates like Anti-Spell Fragrance, you can run 3 copies of it and you just kind of hope you have to see those 3 copies, which obviously it's still a pretty good chance, but when you have 6 copies of something, like say there was a matchup you were really awful against, so you wanted to decide 3 Necro Valley and 3 Terraforming, that's 6 copies of something. And obviously it's going to be hard to side that many cards out, but just say you're running your Senjus or something, you can run 6 copies of Necro Valley, which can entirely shut down certain decks, and you have 6 copies of this Floodgate, which is double the normal amount that you should be able to have, which is definitely insane and can render certain decks just entirely unplayable. Also, there are a lot of field spells that garner an insane amount of advantage over your opponent. Say, I like Magical Meltdown as the best example, because not only does Magical Meltdown search on activation, but it also prevents them from responding to your fusion summon. So if they have a warning, if they have a, say a Hope Harbinger, things like that, they can't negate your fusion spell, which is utterly insane and lets you get tons of advantage because you don't have to worry about the back row. So you're essentially rendering some of their cards useless, at least for a bit. Also, Union Hanger is a good example, just because every turn, that's more and more. They summon one, they're getting another one. It's every turn it's helping them build up advantage and just get card advantage to be able to keep going and basically kill you. Just because I think Hanger is the best example of that, where if you don't deal with it, it can only get worse from there. Even a deck like UA, which needs its field spell to function, the more time you leave that on the field, the more advantage they're going to get and the higher chance they have of actually winning. So having 6 copies of that card, it greatly increased their chances of winning. Now, talking about UAs is actually a good segue into the next part, which is kind of counter-arguments to this, which is, the main one is decks that need a field spell to function. ABC is along those lines just because without it, its consistency is really hurt. UA comes to mind a lot just because they essentially need, they do need the field spell to function. Basically, decks that need the field spell to function, limiting terraforming essentially really cripples those decks because, again, they just need it to function, and even though they may brick with 6 copies of it, it's something they have to do just because they need that to get their deck working. So if you limit terraforming, you're not killing, but you're really hurting certain decks out there. Also, with say more traditional structures like Reinforcement of the Army, it can't get MST'd obviously, but with field spells they're up and they have to obviously stay face up to resolve. So things like Twin Twisters, MST, just general spell and trap removal are also going to hurt those decks. So there's more ways to actually out them than say a traditional searcher, and it's easy to cut off that advantage with spell and trap destruction. But with how crazy the game is nowadays, there are a lot of ways they can pretty much prevent that spell and trap destruction with, again, things like Hope Harbinger, Void Ogre Dragon, things like that. Also, with the prevalence of hand traps, terraforming can be a bit lackluster. With Droll and Lockwood, if you drop it after the terraforming, obviously they won't get any searches off of any of the searcher field spells. Ghost Ash can stop terraforming, an Ogre can stop a field spell, although it can't stop the actual activation in the search of certain ones. It can stop the actual effect activating, like say, whenever they go to equip one from deck with Union Hanger, you can obviously Ogre that. So there are a lot more ways to stop field spells than more traditional. There are a lot more ways to stop field spells than say just regular spells that garner advantage for decks. But those are just a few of my thoughts on where terraforming should be on the ban list. I don't know, personally, even as someone who's playing Cosmos, and I forgot to mention Cosmo, obviously Town is insane. You basically need Town for that deck to function. But it's playing Cosmo, playing Invoked, obviously I like having terraforming, but I feel like with especially Diagram right now, even though hand traps can't hurt it, it's just, terraforming is so good in so many decks, I feel like it deserves a spot on the ban list. Obviously Reinforcement of the Army is warrior specific, but a lot of decks can abuse just generic warriors, like say ABC with Photon Thrasher, Armageddon Knight in certain decks. There's a lot of ways that Rhoda can help a lot of decks almost as a generic card in the same way Terraforming can. And Rhoda is at 1. It just almost seems kind of fitting for Terraforming to be at 1 with how powerful of a card it is, especially right now. But again, there's a lot of factors going into it. It hurts a lot of decks. There's decks that won't be able to function as well with only 1 Terraforming. It's a tough situation, but I do think it should be at 1. But anyway, those are just my thoughts on it. Leave your thoughts down below in the comments. I want to try to get as much input on this as possible to really get a good grasp of the situation. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you later.